The pen tool isn't actually a selection tool, but you can use the shapes you draw with the pen tool as the basis of a selection. In this lesson, we'll see how it's done. The pen tool allows you to create shapes comprised of straight lines and, more importantly, Bezier curves. That makes it especially helpful when creating a selection of an object that contains a variety of curves, such as the sign shown in this photo. To get started, we'll of course choose the pen tool from the toolbox and then configure the settings on the options bar. Let's first take a look at this set of 3 buttons. The first of the 3 will cause a shape to be created, and the last of the 3 will cause pixels to be filled in. What we want is to create a path, which is the middle button. We also want to take advantage of the shape capabilities of the pen tool, so we'll use the first option for the pen tool, not the freeform option. We also have options for creating a variety of shapes, which we're not going to be using in most cases with a photographic image. We also have the option to automatically add or delete as we're creating shapes with the shape tool, and I prefer to have that option turned on. We can also choose whether we want to add, subtract, intersect, or exclude overlapping areas. In this case, it won't make any difference because we're creating a path from scratch. I'll go ahead and zoom in on the right side of the sign here so that we can get started creating a shape. To get started, I'll click on a particular point in the image, and generally I want that to be an obvious intersection of 2 shapes within the image. So I'll go ahead and click at the intersection of these 2 curves, and then I'll go up to the top of the circle here and click and drag to start drawing a Bezier curve. The distance I drag from this anchor point determines where the nodal point of the curve will be, and the direction that I drag determines the direction of the curve. So I can drag to change the position of the handle here in order to align this curve with the shape in the image. When I've matched it up well, I can release the mouse and then click on an additional point to add an additional segment to my curve. I'll once again drag to define that curve. That looks pretty good. And then I'll come down to this other intersecting point, and I'll click and drag to find the best position for that particular curve. That's looking pretty good right there, so we've gotten ourselves off to a very good start with this initial curve. But now I need to change direction for this anchor point. So I'm going to hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on Macintosh and grab the handle and drag it away from that anchor point. In essence, I'm dragging it into a position where it will point toward the curve I want to draw. I'll then click further down this curve and click and drag to draw an additional path point. Now, as you can see, I'm not able to get the curve to align very well with the shape of the sign. That's because I need to refine the position of my initial anchor point over here. So I'll once again hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on Macintosh and click and drag to change the shape of this particular outward nodal point. I can then continue to click and drag on my other anchor point handle here, and right about there it looks like we've gotten things lined up pretty well. I'll once again click further down, and then click and drag as needed to try and adjust the positioning and the angles here, but once again I see that I need to adjust the previous anchor point in order to get a good curve here. So I'll hold the Alt or Option key and click and drag that handle outward just a little bit, and then click and drag again holding the Alt or Option key on my other handle, and right about there we're looking pretty good. Now I'll click down in the intersection of these other shapes and drag, and once again of course fine-tune as needed using the Alt or Option key whenever I need to adjust the handles here. Notice in many cases here I'll need to have one handle be longer than the opposite handle for a given anchor point. Now, I'm not going to go around the entire sign in this case because that would take far too much time for this lesson, so instead I'm simply going to click into the center of the sign and click again, and then go back to my original starting point and click on that original starting point to close the shape. Obviously, under normal circumstances, I would continue working all the way around the sign until I've created a path that defines the outline of that sign perfectly. Once I do have that final path, I can convert it to a selection very, very easily. I'd need to go to the Paths panel, which is not currently visible, so I'll choose Window, Paths from the menu. On the Paths panel, you'll see I have a work path, and I can simply click on the Load Path as Selection button. It's the third button and the one that looks like a dashed circle, and when I click on that button, the path will be loaded as a selection. The pen tool can prove quite useful in situations where you need to define selections based on shapes comprised of straight lines and smooth curves. That certainly isn't every selection, but as you get more comfortable working with the pen tool, you'll likely find that there are many situations where you can put it to great use.